to Reel It Back, the movie review show that brings you all the latest in movie entertainment. I'm David Danger Neff. With me is my guy,
Jay Alonzo. What's going on, Synopsis? Glad to see you again.
And today we're talking about Searching.
Searching, the new directorial debut of Anesh Chaganty.
In this uniquely shot film, it's a very simplistic plot. A father who has recently lost his wife is trying to raise his daughter when she winds up missing. And he has to find different ways of trying to locate her. The
father is played by John Cho of Harold and Kumar fame and Star Trek fame. And this is definitely the John Cho show, if you will. Before we even get to John Cho, can we acknowledge just how clever this movie is shot?
Absolutely.
I mean, it's entirely shot from the view of a laptop. As far as your CNN news coverage, the things he has to go through as far as a father being that concerned about the social media and the text messages and who she's been talking to and FaceTime. This is what you would do as a parent looking for a child that's missing.
Of course. And it brings a really interesting point when it comes to the technology that's used through here. Because a lot of the times when in terms of the privacy of being able to kind of do the forget password trick and then throwing that into a separate email and then able to really figure out the privacy of life, it brings an interesting question of, is the importance of technology in terms of, in this case, a good format, so important? Or is it that the privacy of a person should be mattered, and in this case, would it have actually cost the life?
I'd also add another question as well. Like, when we live in an era where technology is such a way of life, if we didn't have these things, one could be a detective to find his own daughter. If we didn't have these things, where would we be? Absolutely.
And with that very simple question, it's what kind of takes this movie off, because you have FaceTime that's being used. You have all sorts of different applications that's used through Apple. It almost felt like an Apple commercial in a lot of ways.
Oh, this movie was like produced by Apple.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
totally.
And that's really okay. But to kind of get into the acting perspective, this is really, as Jay said, the John Cho show. Any scene that did not involve John Cho, you had him off to the side giving his sort of reaction that's going on. And to be honest, it's his best acting job I've ever seen from him.
Well, ultimately, it's only John Cho we're merely focused on. We have the daughter that we get to connect with, get to know his brother, Debra Messing as the cop. But it's really John Cho's use of emotion and his dedication to find his daughter. And when you really have you to rely on, as a father myself, I'm already on Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, Instagram, seeing what's going on. So I totally feel you. And also, like you said, I think this is John Cho's best performance yet. We know him as Harold. And what did he play in Star Trek? He played
Sulu.
Sulu.
Yeah, he played Sulu.
Yeah, so we know him as these characters, but he showcases so much different range of emotions that you don't really get used to seeing that from John Cho. So he's able to really let loose and give it his all, so which I appreciate.
The other really strong part of this movie is the writing in itself, because everything is incredibly compact. The plot itself isn't necessarily complicated. It's the way that it's shot, and it's the way that the story is told. In fact, after the movie, I kept thinking about the way of the writing techniques kind of kept coming out of it in terms of leading you down this path of it really telling a story. There was not really dull moments in it, although there was moments where it felt like you needed to take a breath, especially towards that final act of the movie. Other focuses, the chemistry between John Cho and Debra Messing, especially trying to get it from the father perspective of like, I'm trying to figure out what's going on. And I feel like I'm only doing as much as I possibly can. And sometimes I just feel like I'm spinning my tires. That in itself, that small little dynamic, I thought was incredibly key for this film.
What did you like about the movie?
There was a couple parts where sometimes it felt like they gave you too much of a breath to recover. So it did kind of slow itself down a little bit, where you're trying to say, okay, I want the story to kind of continue. But really, that's really it. Debra Messing plays off well of John Cho, but you can tell some of the limitations in her own acting.
When she's by herself.
Yeah, when she's by herself is when you really see a little bit of the limitations. How about you, Jay? What are some of the things you didn't care for?
I definitely agree on what you said about Debra Messing and really the use of breaks in the movie. One thing that did kind of bother me as far as I guess being for realism, if you will. John Cho, as the dedicated father that he is, he manages to get access to certain things that I'm curious, like, how did you get access to that? Because certain things are just set in stone. You just can't crack it in and there you go, daughter or not. But, it was that, and then I feel as if, even though I still think the way the movie was shot is incredibly clever, I would like some time away from the computer. But I get it, that's the gimmick for the movie. But at the same time, it's a gimmick that does eventually become kind of run down. But at the same time, with all the twists and the turns in the movie, it makes sense. So if I can give you any kind of negative, connotation about it, it'll probably be that.
I feel comfortable in scoring this thing.
Let's score it.
Why don't you go ahead and tell us how you would score this?
I can go first?
Yes, please.
Okay, so between a great performance by John Cho, who really is the reason why the score is high, because, like I said, his emotions, the way he is dedicated to finding his daughter, you get to see him cry. I've never seen John Cho cry. But overall, great writing, incredibly shot. I'm going to give this a solid 8.
That's pretty solid. For myself, I would give this a little bit higher of a score. I think the writing is incredibly compact and incredibly tight. I also think that it feels fresh the way that it's shot. And yes, there is an argument for, well, can we spend some time away from the computer? Well, sometimes you need to tell the story through the eyes of somebody else, because you're never really seeing it from John Cho's perspective. You're seeing it from John Cho having to react into a situation and looking into this perception. With the strong writing, a little bit of a small, dull part into it, I'm okay with calling this a 9 out of 10. Thank you for watching. For more Reel It Back, please make sure you click the subscribe button somewhere in the browser here.
Over there?
I think you're right, yeah.
And for more Jay and Dave, check out the Bachelor Classics podcast on iHeartRadio, Spotify, and iTunes.